Cool. Hello. Hello, everybody. How we going? We are live. Yes, yes. We'll give everybody a wee moment to come on in to join us. Welcome. Awesome. How are you going today, Josh? Have you had a good day?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I've had my coffee, so I'm doing all right.
Good. Did you have a break?
Part of the morning.
Exactly. Did you have a big breakfast?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
Feeling pretty ready to go.
Oh, I'm going to
see some people coming in. Hi.
Yes, hello. We see some GMs in the chat. That is wonderful. Welcome. Yes, very good. Yeah, everybody's been very excited for this chat, Josh. We were just saying before, Josh and I have been looking forward to this chat for literally how long? Too long.
We've been meaning to do it for a long time. Yeah, it's been at least a couple months. Stuff just keeps coming up. But
Definitely.
We've done it. We've managed today. Unless the internet dies. So touch wood on that, but I think we'll manage.
Yeah. We had like and we've been through this conversation quite a few times as well, Josh, about like how all these things work. And for me, the first time that we sat down and got this down on paper, recorded, it really opened my eyes on how networks and this the system that we use every single day, how it works. So I'm very excited today, guys, to share this chat with you because hopefully you learn something new about technology that you use every single day. And it really does put into perspective why decentralized comms is really important and gets you even more, hyped on what we're doing here over in the Seekers and Sylo. So I'm super excited. And yes, hello everybody in the chat. Wow, good 5 a.m. Oh my goodness,
well done.
I commend you. They were like, there's a poet for this. I am waking up at 5 a.m. I am getting on Twitch. Awesome. Good. We do love a poet. We really do. We've got a really beautiful one for you today. So it'll be good. I know how to get everybody into the talk. So I just say that one word and everyone's like, I'll be there. We need that in my wallet. So that sounds groovy. Good. We'll give everybody a wee while to come in onto the chat, and then we'll get into it. Usually, Josh, what we do when we have these live streams is it's become a bit of a theme, is because I love a pun. I love a pun, and we have a bit of a pun competition. Oh look, Captain KDB, before I even started, is in the chat with Sentinels. So he knows how we do it. He understands. That is very good. But I can't think of any really good puns for decentralized comms. Like, can you think of any good puns for decentralized comms, Josh?
It's a bit of a tough prompt. I reckon you'll have a better chance at the end because we'll have talked through a bunch of stuff and there'll be some connections to make. So that might be a fun little competition, is see what the best we can do out the other end of this is.
Absolutely, I think so. Yeah, at the end of it, you'll have a new vocabulary of technical terms to impress and educate your friends, which is going to be very exciting. So that is good. Awesome. Oh, Frisco, stop it. I'm embarrassed. But yeah, cool and groovy. We'll wait for 5 minutes. So I'll give you, it's 4:20 seconds of the stream right now. I was waiting for it. Once we get to 5 minutes, I think maybe we should get into it because I know that everybody has been really excited for this chat. And yeah. Okay, there was a good one. I'm not schizophrenic, I'm decentralized.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. That's a good one.
That's a good one. I like that. Cool. So we're gonna the way that this is gonna work is Josh is going to present his wonderful talk on decentralized communication and privacy, and there will be a couple of points during the conversation where we will open up the floodgates to questions related on the topic. Please note alpha hunting. This is for educational purposes only. And yeah, so and if you are if you have a question relating to a slide and we've maybe gone back to it, just make sure to give us some context in your questions when we open the floor. And if you need any clarity, maybe you don't quite understand. Not the sorry, now I got distracted. If you need any clarity, just feel free to like quickly write a little message in, and I'll just say, Josh, hey, 1 second, this person just can you go back 1 second and explain that a little bit more in detail, and that'll be good as gold. But cool. So how are we feeling, chat? Do you think that we're ready to get into it? You can give me what's your favorite emoji, Josh?
I don't know if you're going to have it on Discord. There's a fantastic, what is it called? Kakapo, which is dancing and flashing in rainbow colors. That's my go-to. It's from a Stephen Fry documentary, and it's a hilarious moment.
But I didn't realize it was a kakapo.
Yeah. It's a native New Zealand parrot that gets a bit excited about one of Stephen Fry's cameramen. So I'll let you find that clip on your own. But every time I love using that in a work context because no one else knows what it's from, and it's just it's a little in joke, and I really enjoy it.
Wow, you've been educating us secretly on native New Zealand birds without us knowing. I've loved that little emoji. I've made that with my seeker on it now, so it floats around, but it's my seeker on it. So yeah. Okay, so give us I don't think that they have that emoji on this, but we can. Give us a bird emoji if you think that we're ready to rumble. Because Josh is the bird guy. He definitely is. We had a really terrible. My icebreaker before we started was, "Oh, I'm gonna go shoot a turkey on the weekend," and he's like, "I was like, oh, that was the worst thing to say to Josh. Josh is the bird guy. Why did I just tell Josh that I was gonna shoot a bird?"
It's exactly what you want to hear before presenting a complicated topic, is something nice, and it really helps with the clarity of mind and not distracting at all.
Yeah. Totally.
I see all right. That's pretty close to a bird. Hey, there we go. I see some chickens.
I see some very beautiful. Oh, look, that Chad NZ. That definitely looks like a kakapo. Actually, I don't know where you got that emoji from, but
yeah, pretty much perfect.
Yeah. All righties, amazing. We're getting some chickens in the chat. No turkeys, please. That's going to trigger Josh just before we start. Please, no. All right. Okay, amazing. Well, without further ado, I would love to introduce to you the one, the only, Mr. Josh Dawes from the Sylo and Seekers team. Woohoo!
Nice. Hey, everyone. Let's see. I can get over to the slides. Maybe I'll jump on there. That's awesome. Yeah, okay. So welcome to the talk, or actually the first talk in a bit of a series of talks that I have planned. And so the key thing we're going to talk about today is basically the problem that we're trying to solve. So what is centralization? Why is it an issue, essentially? So that is sort of the first part in a story that I have planned for a few talks, which we'll see soon. But first, I think I'll tell you a little bit about me, just for some context. So I do tokenomics research at Sylo, is the simplest way to sum it up. That actually has been covering a lot of details, but I suppose the simple version is that I look at anything to do with the Sylo token and the incentives that are present in the Sylo network. And the idea is to sort of design the network in a way where the incentives encourage everybody to cooperate and to behave in a way that benefits the network as a whole. That's sort of a short and high level summary. And so to do that, I have, there's a fair bit of math and economics. And so that's my background. I did applied math and engineering in university. a fair bit of sort of optimal planning, that sort of stuff, and it's nicely segued me into the blockchain space, which I think is really interesting and exciting. And I was surprised, honestly, how much it fit, because before this, I used to work for more sort of straightforward engineering companies, but turns out there's a lot of crossover, which has been pretty cool. Yeah, so that's me. So just to give you some context for where this talk fits in, the 4 that I have planned are on screen right now. So the first one here, actually, this is interesting. Can people see my mouse? I'd like to be able to point at things, but I'm not sure if it works. Monty, can you see it? That might be the easiest way to check. Guess not. We're going to have to work with that.
Oh, no, we can see the mouse.
Can. Okay, cool. That helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, so this is the first talk, which is today's one. And yeah, we're going to be talking about what centralized communications actually means, and what implications that has for privacy, and why that's a problem. The second talk is going to be about how else you might build comms infrastructure. So if you don't do it in a centralized way, there are alternatives. And then a bit of a deep dive into how they perform and what their pros and cons are. The third one gets into some of the problems that are associated with the other approaches. Altruism and sort of cooperation among strangers is quite a big theme, as it turns out. And so that leads into this concept of trustlessness, where you want people to be able to cooperate despite not knowing each other and having no particular reason to believe that they will treat each other well. Essentially, you need to set up a system where you don't rely on people being nice to one another in order to keep everyone safe and cooperating happily. And that, I think, is the best context to introduce smart contracts and how the blockchain comes into what we do at Sylo. And then the final one, once we get there, will be a bit of a deep dive into the specifics of what we're doing with this stuff, and how it applies to the Sylo network. So that's the overall shape of the story we're telling. So dive in, I just want to say a few almost sort of housekeeping things. So this is intended to be kind of a window into the problems that we're working on. And it's hopefully sort of fairly informal, and a lot of this is how I see things, not necessarily the right way to see things. So I suppose just keep that in mind. And the other thing is I'm trying to make this quite accessible. So if you've got a technical background, a lot of what I say will be quite vague, like definitely imprecise, and it might seem wrong as well from a particular viewpoint if you know more about a particular area. So that's intentional in the slides. We can get more technical in the questions, but just keep in mind that I'm not an expert on everything that we do at Sylo. So yeah, so it might be I'm not the best person to talk about this. Yeah, so that's it. So with all that in mind, I guess we can jump in. Let's get cracking. So at a very high level, you can think about the internet like this diagram. So over here, we have a device that I own, and over here might be your device. So the devices could be like phones or laptops or servers or any computer at all, really, that's connected to the internet. And if our devices want to talk, the message that gets sent has to follow a path between the other computers on the internet. So what these computers are, how they work, who owns them, there's a lot of detail that's hidden by this. But essentially, these links just represent which computers can talk directly to one another. So my phone might talk to the cell tower, which talks to some other piece of infrastructure higher up the chain, and then it comes back down to your device wherever you happen to be connected. So again, lots of detail, but this sort of captures the network that is the internet nice and cleanly. And so we want to think about messaging on the internet, which is essentially moving some information from my device to your device, or vice versa. And so the key thing is that messaging here, that the message itself can be a variety of things. So that could be some text that I've typed in like an IM client, that could be a photo, That could be a video clip or a voice clip. But the key thing is that it's something that we don't want it to be real time. So I'm not talking here about things like a live video call, for example. It's something that can be sent and then received later, and both people don't have to be present at the same time. So most people imagine that when you send a message, essentially that information just moves from my device to each computer on the path between us, and then to your device, and it's done. So it just sort of happens when you hit send, and then that's it. That's kind of the first way that people would think about messaging. But that's not quite right. And to understand why, it's worth looking at what the problems with this kind of an approach are. So the first problem is what I'm going to call the discovery problem, which is essentially, how does my device know where on the network your device is? Finding this route through the different computers, not going down a dead end or not going the wrong way, and eventually reaching your device and actually delivering the content, delivering that message. So the thing about discovery that's hard is that devices can change where they are on the network. So if you think of like a typical commute, say, where you wake up in the morning and your phone is on home Wi-Fi, and then you leave the house and you swap to mobile data, which means you change from being connected here to being connected there. And then after a while, you get to the train, and the train offers free Wi-Fi, so you swap to that, and you're at a different place again. And then you get to work, and you're on work Wi-Fi. And so devices, particularly mobile devices, move around on the network a lot. And the challenge is that my device at all times needs to know how to get a message to you in order to do this direct sort of peer-to-peer style sending of information. So you can imagine that you might be able to get around this, where every time your device moves, it calls me up or it sends me a message back and says, hey, I've just moved. I used to be at position A, now I'm at position B. You can reach me here now. And that works okay when only one device is moving. But the really hard part is if both devices move at the same time, because then I don't know how to reach you and you don't know how to reach me. And we're essentially just stuck, where there's no way, short of some additional component in the system, there's no way to get the two devices in touch again, because all of their information is now stale. So that's the discovery problem. And that's one of the two big issues with this direct messaging approach. The second one is what I'm calling the synchronicity problem. And that is essentially that if you want your messages to be delivered, then both devices have to be online. So if you, in an IM chat, you send a message, you get those notifications where it says sent and then received. That's essentially what I'm talking about, is you can't do that when you're sending messages directly between two devices, because there's no nowhere that will hold the message in the meantime before it reaches you. And so you can imagine that a lot of the time this would just cause some delay. So you'd hit send on your phone, and then eventually your partner would come online, your device would come online and would be able to send that message at that point in time. So it would just result in it arriving delayed. But imagine if you had a friend in like Iceland or something, from the perspective of New Zealand, you might never be online at the same time in the worst case. And so you need some way of making it that when your device turns on, if there are messages that I've sent, they're ready to be collected somehow, no matter what my phone is doing, because phones are not always on, essentially. Yeah, that's the synchronicity problem. And so those two together mean that it's quite hard to give the same level of user experience using a peer-to-peer messaging process that you can get from a centralized process. So this is what I mean by a centralized process. Rather than sending the message from my device to your device directly, there is a messaging server with a database on it, and it essentially stores messages that I've sent until you come and collect them. So we both essentially meet in the middle of this server, and it hands off information from me to you, storing a copy in the meantime. So if you're currently offline, I would send a message, it would go to the server, it would sit there until you came online, and then you would be able to get the message. And so that is essentially how a messaging server helps. It solves that synchronicity problem because the server is online all the time. And so whenever you want messages from me, you can ask the server, hi, do you have anything for me? That's how that one gets solved. But it also solves the discovery problem because the server itself doesn't move. And so that means that if your phone hops to a new network, all it needs to do is get back in touch with the server, which is in the same fixed place all the time reliably, and then it's all working again. So we don't need to find each other, we just both need to find the midpoint. And that's a lot easier because that midpoint is fixed. There's like a rendezvous that both phones can access. So in that sense, there's some really big advantages to this sort of centralized architecture. There's a computer here that's storing a copy of everything we send to one another, and it makes the user experience of communication a lot better. The big downside, I suppose, is that now there's another computer out there owned by someone else that has a copy of our messages on it. And that has some privacy implications. So that at a high level is the idea of what a centralized messaging service is versus a decentralized one. And I think now might be a good time to see how that landed, whether I explained that pretty well. So maybe we open up for some questions here and see what people have to say. What do you think, Monty?
Yep. If anybody has any questions up until this point, feel free to pop it into the chat now. That would be great. But yes, I'll give you 30 seconds. But yeah, it is. I mean, it's pretty incredible to think that you can just when our parents were younger, they weren't able to communicate across the world, and they were over in say the UK to New Zealand, and now we have this technology that you can just instantly message anybody across the world, and how this works is pretty interesting. So that's cool. The pipe is going to be at the end, so wait for that.
Eyes on the prize. Very good.
Right, yeah, and everyone's like, when pipe. Okay, cool. It sounds like everybody is up to date. We're all up to scratch. So
yeah, that's good. That's what I was hoping to hear.
Cool.
Yeah, so we'll carry on. Right. So that's like at a high level the technical architecture of what's going on. But let's get into why this copy of our messages might be a problem. It's a very hackneyed saying by now, but there's this idea that if you aren't paying for a product on the internet, it's likely that you are the product. And so we can break that down into a bit of detail. If you look at any kind of communications company, so I'll take sort of Facebook or Meta as an example, they provide this infrastructure to the user. From their perspective, it's free. Yeah. Excuse me. And so you have to sort of ask, well, if they're paying all this money for servers and hardware and all that sort of stuff, a bunch of different software developers to build this stuff, then what's in it for them? What makes it worth their while? And the key business that most communications companies are in, so social media, any kind of messaging like that, is advertising, targeted marketing specifically. So to give you a sense of like what that's worth, Meta's average revenue per user was about $41 in 2021. That's just out of their earnings report. And that varies a lot by where in the world the user is from. So I think an American's worth something like $200 a year to Meta on average, which is a lot more than you would probably pay up front to use their services. That's just like an interesting comparison to make, is they're making quite a bit of income off of having your information, and quite a bit more than you would be willing to pay them to actually get access to the social network, probably. I mean, that's certainly true for me. I guess your mileage might vary. So when they provide these communication services, the goal is to get information about you in the process and then use that information to place ads in front of you. And what's tricky about this, like I suppose advertising in the abstract is more or less okay. You know, it's got to happen somehow. It's not that different from newspapers. But the tough part is that the more that they know about you, the more that you are worth. And that's because advertisers are willing to pay more money for an advertising spot, like a unit of sort of pixels on a web page that someone will see. They're willing to pay more money for that placement if the person viewing it is very likely to buy what they're selling, which is targeted advertising. You know, there's not much point advertising chainsaws to somebody who lives in an apartment complex. But if they've got a big yard, that's a much better prospect, right? They might have some work to do in the yard that they want to use that for. So the more that the messaging service can learn about you, the more money that you're worth to them. And this essentially puts privacy in tension. Even if a company that uses this business model promises to, do X or Y in terms of privacy, there is always a financial incentive for them to do something else, to learn more about you and to make money. And essentially what that means is there's always a reason for them to misbehave. It's not necessarily a guarantee that a particular company or a particular management team will misbehave, but it does mean that there's always this motivating force that makes it a constant risk. And so this is essentially why this business model of centralized communications and advertising will tend to invade privacy more over time, because as soon as a management team or a shareholder set, or, whichever decision-making group comes in that thinks it's worth the trade, they will make more money by learning more about you. And the only thing stopping them is, well, will users react to that loss of privacy? There's a benefit, but the potential cost is the only thing stopping them if they aren't morally principled. And there's no guarantee that everyone will be morally principled about this over the long term. So that's the sort of backsliding thing. There's always this incentive to learn more about you. The other side effect of this is that advertising as a business model directly leads to the sort of walled garden phenomenon that we see with big tech, where these big companies are trying to keep you within their own ecosystem. Like, just off the top of my head, Google Maps versus Apple Maps. The world doesn't really need two of them, in the sense that they're both pretty good and either one would kind of do. But both companies want to keep you within their ecosystem when they're selling you a service, because information about you is more valuable if it's scarce. So if an advertiser wants to reach you to sell, I don't know, again, we'll go with chainsaws. If two different people have the information that you like chainsaws, then the advertiser can buy that information from either party, right? And so there's kind of a bidding war from the seller of the information that drives the price down. But if a user is only known about by one of these guys, then that's the only way you can learn targeted information about that user. And so these big guys have an incentive to keep you within their walled garden and make sure that they are the only ones who know about you, because that makes you a more valuable user to them. And so this sort of happened. This is where my history is probably a little vague, but there was a time sort of in the big Web 2.0 boom where a lot of services like Google Maps had like a public API where anyone could use it, and you could sort of mash together these cool things that different companies were doing and to create your own projects that essentially drew the best from everything and created some really cool stuff. But this business model has ultimately meant that that kind of web development, that kind of software development just doesn't make economic sense for the big guys anymore. So they've stopped offering those kind of options, which to me feels like a real shame. The final aspect of this is that once you've been learned about, once your data is out there, you can't reel it back in. And that's because these advertising companies aren't just placing ads on their own platforms, but they're also selling the data itself. Like, hey, I know that the person with this phone number has an interest in trains. That's a fact that comes from a reputable source, like someone like Facebook. That information could be sold on to a third-party advertiser. And then even if you delete your Facebook profile, that information has been pushed out into the world and it's sitting in a different database somewhere else. And there's no mechanism for retrieving that. So it's kind of a one-way thing. Yeah. So I suppose here, if we get a bit more philosophical, I don't think there's anything wrong to let people choose to give away their data in order to get access to a cool app. Like that seems, like it's your choice, you do what you like. But I think the fact that it's mandatory, it's the only way that you can get in there, is not cool. And that's essentially my personal opinion. But I think that's one of the big motivators, is like this isn't the only way it could be done, and it's a little weird that it's the default. Yeah, that sort of sums it up. I think here is also a good place to pause. There's quite a bit packed into this slide. So if anyone's got any questions on this stuff or wants to add anything to do with this sort of thing, I'd love to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, you raised a couple of really good points there, Josh. I think obviously, like if you're not paying for the product, you are the product is a big one, because back now we just instantly message people on Facebook. It's quick, it's easy, it's free. Whereas before, you'd have to pardon me, sorry, you'd think I'd be doing all the talking. Whereas before, yeah, you'd have to pay for international calling. It would be really expensive. And that wasn't too long ago. And now we've got into this model of, yeah, it's free, but the trade-off is your information and data, and you have no choice, which is pretty questionable. Anyway, have we got any questions in the chat? No? We good as gold. Yeah, would people use Meta if it wasn't free? Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it, right? If they were to charge what it costs to, well, certainly Meta would be making a lot less profit if they had to charge just to use their messaging, right? Because people wouldn't pay that $200 a year in the US. That's a lot more money than I think people would value the service at. So they've kind of found this way of getting much more bang for their buck out of having you as a user than just asking you to pay for the service.
Yeah. Though I guess I feel like I would pay money to have them not harvest all my data, to be honest. I'd be like, yeah, please no. But I shouldn't have to pay. You should just not harvest my data. But anyway, we've got one question there. Do they need, how will advertisers find me? Do they need to be in the Sylo network as well? Well, you could, yeah, that goes on to our next topic.
Yeah, I think that comes up in one of the later ones. This is more talking about what's wrong with the existing stuff and what we're trying to fix.
Yeah. Cool. I think that we don't have too many questions, so we'll just keep rolling on. Cool.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so that's a long-winded way of saying that if you have your information that's accessible in one of these centralized servers, then eventually someone's going to have a reason to go looking around and learn about you because of this profit motive from advertising. So one common thing that comes up in response to that is there a technical solution? Like, can we just design the system in a way where it's impossible for them to go snooping like that? Still have a centralized server, but perhaps, perhaps hide the information so that only the people who are meant to be reading your messages can actually read them. And so that concept is known as end-to-end encryption. So the two ends are your device and my device. And encryption is essentially we're glossing over quite a complicated topic here, but you can think about it as putting what's in your messages inside of a locked box. And that box can't be opened by anybody except the person with the key. So if I put it in a box that only you can open, and then I send it, while it's in the messaging server, while it's on the way, it's locked and essentially just looks like random information, zeros and ones. The messaging server can't understand what it means. But then once it's delivered to your device, you can use your key to turn it back into, hey, what are you up to this weekend? And actually get the content of your message through. It's just that it's hidden and opaque to you're in the middle. Yeah, you can go into a lot of detail on exactly how encryption works, but it's not super important for this. And so I suppose to investigate this idea, like, can you solve this problem with end-to-end encryption? It's helpful to look at a couple case studies. So I'm going to use WhatsApp, which is a chat app that uses end-to-end encryption that's been bought by Facebook. It started off as a startup and then was acquired. And then there's Signal, which is actually run by a non-for-profit entity. So the two of these, I guess, will help us to look at how you might do a centralized system better and what the pros and cons of that might be. So we can jump into WhatsApp. The biggest problem is that even if you hide content of the message itself, so like what's actually being said, there's some information being sent that is impossible to hide. So like the fact that Josh messaged Monty at 5 p.m. on Friday is still information. And if you think about that information added up across all of your contacts, you get a pretty good sense of who knows who, who's close to who, and how likely people are to have similar opinions. Essentially, you know, if you're messaging someone a lot, you probably like them, and therefore you probably have a similar view. So even if you don't know anything about the people in particular, if you've from the metadata, if you have other information about them from sources, you can use that metadata to learn indirectly about the people involved. You can map their social network, and you can say, well, hey, you know, Josh likes chainsaws, so maybe Monty does too, which is, you know, usually correct, at least for certain kinds of thing. So there are ways for these to make money off of your data, even when the message content itself is encrypted. And WhatsApp is also a good case study to look at because it shows an example of this sort of privacy backsliding that I was talking about. So when the acquisition was made, WhatsApp was a privacy-first company. You know, it made its brand off of the end-to-end encryption and security side of things. And when the acquisition happened, Facebook essentially promised that the metadata wouldn't be shared for advertising purposes. And that essentially didn't happen. I mean, there's a lot to read about this. You can look it up if you like. But in 2021, there was a big sort of a bit of a scandal in terms of how that data was being used. And a bunch of users quit. And in fact, a lot of them moved over to Signal and Telegram and a variety of others, more privacy-focused messengers. But ultimately, it didn't end up being the death knell of WhatsApp. You know, it's still popular today and lots of people still use it. And so in that situation, somebody at Facebook probably made a calculation and said, well, hey, the extra money we make off of all of our users is worth losing, say, 5% of our users over privacy concerns. So we still make money overall. And they've found it profitable to go back on their privacy promises. And I guess the thing is that they are always able to do that because the software is centralized. So if you have a server with all of the messages on it, that sort of thing is always possible because they can just change how the app works and how the system works. Decentralized systems are often harder to change unilaterally like that, which is one reason that they tend to be more appropriate for privacy. Essentially, if the users don't vote with their feet, then you can expect privacy to continually stepping backwards, so long as there's a profit motive involved. And that brings us to Signal, because in my opinion, they're actually quite a good solution to this problem. They remove the profit motive by being a non-profit organization with a charitable purpose of privacy. So they say, yeah, we technically could read your stuff and collect your metadata and so on, but nobody can acquire us and make money by doing that because that would be illegal because of our charitable purpose. And so the legal system essentially says that you can trust them, because if they stop acting in the interests of privacy, then they can get sued and so on. So that in a lot of ways helps. It means that they don't have this incentive to go snooping anymore. But the question becomes, can an app that's built in that way and with a charitable purpose compete in the mainstream against an advertising business model? So Signal is doing very well. They've got 40 million active users, free to use with donations if you to support them. But the key thing is that the more users they pick up, the more that they have to spend on their servers and services and so on. And they've probably picked up most of the keen privacy advocates by now, the ones who are willing to donate and support them. So the question is sort of, could you do the whole thing this way? Could you make everything work in that manner? And is that, is that a way to solve the problem for everybody, or is it just a good option if you particularly need privacy? So what would be ideal is if everything were to have this privacy built in by default, so that people could choose to give away their data to use apps or not, up to their own preference, and it wouldn't really matter whether the app you picked was privacy focused like Signal or not. That would be sort of the ideal version of this. The other key question is, can we be sure that the funding for a philanthropic app will last forever? Privacy and communications is a pretty fundamental thing in the digital world. And so it seems at least a little bit risky to bet that the Signal Foundation will be around forever or something like them. It doesn't seem like a future-proof solution. So that sort of rounds this off. And hopefully what I've been able to do today is highlight a few key questions and a few key problems that we need to solve. So how do you design a network where the user's data is under their own control? How can you make a business model around that network that brings it to market at scale without compromising privacy? And how do you make it long-term sustainable, even as the people who operate the network might change? Those are the goals that we're trying to achieve and the problems we're trying to solve with decentralization. Yeah, I think that's the essence of this talk. It does leave a lot of questions open, but hopefully what this does is gives a sense of what the solutions we're going to talk about in the next talks will actually be aiming to do. Lays the groundwork for why we need what we're building.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Josh. Now we'll open the floor to any other questions that people have. I'll have a little look down the chat to see if we have any there at the moment.
We've got a few good ones. I'm having to scroll as well.
Cool. You can see them? Cool. Perfect. What kind of... Cool. Feel free to pop your messages in below. We have one. Cool. Anyone you want to take there, Josh? Can you see them?
Yeah. I'm just looking through. I'm going to try and pick out a few. I'm still getting used to the streaming thing. Sorry, the chat keeps moving on me. Okay. So there's a really good one here from Atlas Apples, which says, given that we've got sort of encrypted messaging stuff that's been widely available for a long time, what in particular is, why do we want the Sylo network when there are good privacy solutions that work? And I think the key thing is that there are definitely technical solutions for people who really care about privacy. But the tough part is that it's quite important from a social perspective that privacy is the default. like, I mean, I don't know if you know about the Cambridge Analytica stuff that went on during one of the US elections, where essentially the kind of learning about people that's done for advertising can, I mean, for example, political ads are a type of advertising, and you start to get into sort of civil society questions of like, is this good for the world, as opposed to just, you know, privacy for its own sake. So what the Sylo network's aiming to do is not only to provide a way to do stuff privately, but also provide a sustainable way that everything can be made private without people having to prioritize it themselves, I guess is how I would answer that one. And we'll see more about how that might work in the later talks. It gets quite detailed, but that's I think the difference is that those encryption methods work, but they don't solve that broader goal of making it work privately by default.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. I hope that answered your question. We'll answer a couple more. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Yeah, Rio Poap is coming. Bear with. Cool. Is there much? Yeah. Is there much of an? Can you read them, or should I read some of them out?
Yeah, feel free to suggest them. I'm having a scan as well.
Cool. Yeah, Papa Bearsy just popped one in there. Is there much of an appetite for a fix? It feels like people just go with the status quo a lot. I used to care about data sharing, but I just have to go into it. Now I tell my phone what I want, and I will just wait for the ads. I'm like, yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Some people definitely do that.
I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one interesting way that you could phrase that question is like, would you want a cut of that $200 a year that Facebook is earning from you, right? So because Facebook has the monopoly on that information and selling it, they are able to sort of, I don't know, I'm using this loosely, but there's this term in economics called like rent seeking, where because you have a monopoly, you're kind of extracting more money from something than a competitive market equilibrium would give you. So like if companies were able to compete fairly on advertising, and it was less of this like lockout kind of walled garden stuff, basically users would get a better deal. They might be able to share in the benefits of what they're providing to advertisers, or they might choose not to altogether and just pay their own way. And I think that's the key thing is if you build in a layer where the data sharing is an optional extra, you can please everybody. Whereas the only people who are really having trouble with the status quo right now are the privacy people. But I think a lot of that is because the costs of losing your privacy are hidden. Whereas if you could phrase it as sort of as an explicit benefit to people for sharing, and they get a cut of that, that might change people's minds and make it more mainstream. That sort of, does everybody care, or will everybody care, seems to be a common theme in these questions. So I hope that answers a few other people's questions who we haven't got through directly.
Definitely. I think like, education about it is really, really important because, like I said at the beginning, it's something that we use every single day and we have no idea how it works and how we're actually being a product of that. And we're not even getting paid for it. So very silly. Let's have a look. Any other? There is, I don't know if, oh wait, we did, no, we did that question. What kind of innovations? Is this other Atlas Apple question? I'm trying to not think of like questions that might put you on the spot, but there was another one that said, another question, what kind of interfaces can we expect from Sylo? WhatsApp/Sylo decentralized clone Discord type system? I don't know if that's something that you can answer, but there was that.
Yeah, I'm just looking to read it. Yeah, there we go. So I think with the Sylo network, what we're aiming to do, there's a couple of facets to this. So one thing that's tricky is integrating with those kinds of things. Like, for example, getting Sylo messaging to work with WhatsApp is not something that WhatsApp or Facebook as a company will ever go for, right? Because of that walled garden thing, they've got this incentive to keep stuff within their own ecosystem. And so I think, excuse me, pardon me. I think one of the key goals of the Sylo network is to provide a comms layer that people can build on top of, in a way where everything that people do using that fundamental infrastructure is secure and private by default. And then once that is sort of proven to work, technically, it's the sort of thing where the apps on top of it will drive uptake. And so I'm not really the best person to talk about this, but that's a large part of why we're working on comms for the metaverse, because it's this nice sort of this new, exciting, expanding area of Web3 that people are keen on, and it's sort of a fantastic proving ground for the tech, where we can say this is exactly how this will work when it goes out everywhere. And it's a crowd that are sort of much more knowledgeable about this kind of thing than the average person too. So like it gives us a nice group of users who are excited about the benefits and are keen to get on board and help something like this grow.
Cool. We have another question here. If Signal has already captured the market that will donate and really care about privacy, how will Sylo differentiate further than simply privacy, as it seems Signal already has people who really care about that? I guess that kind of actually goes into the question you just answered.
Yeah, it's sort of related. The key thing I think is that Signal sees every additional user or use of their systems as a cost. And so they have to be quite tight with who they let use their infrastructure, because they have to manage that cost. What we're hoping to do with the Sylo network is to set it up so that if you want to use private, secure, decentralized comms, all you need to do is bring some money along and say, hey, yeah, I'd like to buy some of this, and I value this, and I think it's important. And that through the sort of incentives in the Sylo network, which we'll get to in later talks, that means that the Sylo network will grow and be more capable of providing that service. So like, rather than just relying on philanthropy, we almost build like a business around it, where the more people who want this, the more people will be providing it through nodes, through running nodes and providing Sylo network services. That's fairly hand wavy, because I don't, it'll happen more precisely in the later talks, but I think that gives some idea.
Cool. There's another good question here that says, genuine question, how do you stop the platform from being used for nefarious purposes? Is that sure? Oh, yeah. Look, put it on the side like that. That's cool.
How about that? Which platform do you mean, Marco? Do you mean the Sylo?
Centralized ones?
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry. Big picture of my face. All right. There is another one. How does wallet-to-wallet communication fit into all this? When will mass adoption of this be a reality?
That's a really good one. It would be good to be able to take this one a bit more slowly, but in a couple of sentences. Yep. Something that's really interesting is that a wallet address is also kind of like an ID. If you know the private key, you can sign stuff to prove that stuff came from you, and you can have other people encrypt stuff for you so that only you can read it. And so there's this quite natural link between having a wallet and being able to communicate with the owner of that wallet in a way where only that person can read it. So it's kind of a nice unintentional, well, possibly unintentional consequence of the way that wallets work, is that they also fit quite nicely into communications niche. And so, for example, if you wanted to message the owner of a seeker and have it only be that person could read the message, you would just look on the blockchain and find out which wallet held that seeker and then encrypt it for that wallet. And so you would know that your message would only go to the person who owned the seeker. because of the way that encryption works. So that's a little technical, but essentially, yeah, there's this nice link between encryption for comms and wallet addresses and private keys.
Cool. Hopefully that answered your question. Let's have a look. When do you expect it to be? Any limitations to message size, or is it just text, or can you send movie clips, etc.? Does that mean I'm not too sure of the context?
Yeah,
I think
that one's a bit too implementation specific. I think would have to get some more groundwork laid out first.
Cool.
I think in principle, it could do a variety of things. So it comes down to what you design it for, really. Like there's some parameters in the way the network works where you could optimize it for working for one thing or another. But yeah, that's a pretty ham-wavy answer.
Cool. All right, cool. Sweet. Well, I think if that is everybody's questions, we're almost getting up to an hour. So I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm gonna rein it in. Josh, thank you so much for this presentation. This has been really, really good, and I hope that you've learned something new today. I saw a really great comment in there of somebody. It was a really good comment, which is exactly the point of this whole chat, which was oh no, I can't find it. Just kidding. But yeah, so thank you everybody for tuning in. Josh, thank you so much for spending your time with us today and sharing this wonderful presentation. This is just part one of the series, ladies and gentlemen. So if this has ignited a fire of passion and enthusiasm for decentralized communication, and you want to know more so that you can tell your friends and family about why this is very, very important and how this technology that we use every day actually works and why you should be passionate about decentralization, well, I have good news for you. This is the first and certainly will not be the last. We are just finalizing a date for our second chat, but it's going to be very, very exciting. Next up is decentralized communication systems. So we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty on decentralized communication systems rather than this one, which was mostly on how the centralized platforms work, the ones that lots of people typically use every day. So that's going to be great. Thank you so much for your questions and your contribution in the chat. That's been wonderful. It's always so good to come on and chat to you guys. Thank you so much for your banter. It is wonderful. And the moment that you've all been waiting for, and by you've all been waiting for, I mean, Rio Star exclusively, the POAP. I did say that there was a little bit of a thing that you'll get today. So if you go into the Seekers Discord, open a ticket, and write the word chainsaw, we will be sending you the link for that POAP that you can get into your wallet, and there will be some little things announced later for those who claim all 4 POAPs for all 4 of our educational series participation things. So yes, chainsaw, please. Chainsaw, not chaser, chainsaw. It seemed to be Josh's buzzword for the day. So if you write the word chainsaw, you've got it in the chat there. Yep. Pop it on into our Discord tickets. Somnium is going to send you a link and you will be good as gold. Yes, thank you. Cool. Perfect. Everybody pop in chainsaw into the chat. That's great. You could put that into a Discord. When you say, how can I say chainsaw? I don't know how to make that sound less Kiwi.
Less Kiwi. That's a tough one. Sorry, guys. You just stuck with us.
Yeah. I was like, I feel like it would be worse if we said, like, okay, you have to write the word beer, because everyone would be like, what? What
everyone
is
write
that?
down, yeah. I
had a faux pas when I was in Australia trying to find some pens. It was like a comedy sketch. I was like, pens, and they're like, pens? Pens. It was Bunnings Warehouse, lowest prices are just the beginning. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining in.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
So wonderful. Amazing. All right. Well, I will be in the Discord. So if you want to come and have a little chat, feel free. Yeah. All right, Josh, any parting words?
Not really. Just thanks all for coming. It's cool to see so much interest. And yeah, really looking forward to the next one. So I'll see you guys there.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. See you on Discord. Woohoo.